Welcome, everybody. Okay, so if you're new here, my name is Yoni. I'm a life coach helping people to remain calm in the storms of life. We're programmed to be in negativity. We're programmed to be in worries, concerns, fear, doubt. So we want to scream and shout and have those kinds of bouts. But instead, we could get rid of that dread and not feel like we're dead, but live a different kind of life where we let go of that strife. I was married almost 11 years, and a lot of things had to change and rearrange, and it gets strange. But there are many paths on this journey, and my path growing up, I was born to Orthodox Judaism. So when you're born into Orthodox Judaism, you think that's your path because everyone tells you that's your path. And so you go along that path because what are you supposed to do? You grow up in a Jewish home. You feel like that's the zone you got to be in. So here we go. So you go in that flow. The funny thing is, in that world that I grew up in, I grew up in what's called modern Orthodoxy. So modern Orthodoxy, like it's really like this quasi Judaism where like there's like you have to marry Jewish, you have to eat kosher, you have to follow the holidays and go to Jewish schools and all those things. But there was no in a lot of the world that I was growing up in, there was no spirituality. There was no real depth to the religion. It was more like rules for fools. And then they come off as cruel because they're like, why are we keeping these rules that nobody cares about? People are complaining. You're around complaining about religion, complaining about keeping Sabbath, complaining about keeping kosher, complaining about this, complaining about that. Vacations become problems because you have to always eat kosher. So there was always issues, and there was always like time constraints because when you're dealing with a religion, especially with Judaism, there's Shabbat, Sabbath, and holidays where you have to like be on. If you don't get somewhere and you're in a car, you could get stuck in your car and you have to like walk and all this stuff. So you can't use technology and all this stuff. So life gets a little rough in that way. And especially when there's no like love in it, it's just like cruel rules because you have to follow, and it's like hollow. This whole thing was like, where is it? So I went to Israel at age 18. That kind of scene. I went to study my religion. That's what a lot of Jewish Orthodox kids do at age 18, especially if you're modern. They send you to Israel so that way they can make you solidified in the Jewish world. So you stay in that box and you stay in that journey and you stay on the path that they tell you to stay on. Now, what's interesting is that some kids come back like me. I came back growing out my beard, growing out my sour curls, shaved my head, and I was going about this religious way. And I went full on in a religious path and I became a rabbi, got married, and I was down that path, really down the path to the point where I judged other people for sure because I was like, people that were doing Judaism, especially Jewish people who were like not really doing Judaism. I was like, oh, that's not the right way and all that kind of stuff. And then of course you're judging other people in a sense because once you start judging, you're judging everything. And then really what happens is when you're judging other people, you're judging yourself. And you're judging yourself, especially when you're not perfect within the religion, because that's your admission, that's your decision. Because what happens is when you're doing your religion, you know what you're not keeping behind closed doors. You realize you have to find a way. So I looked every which way to find a way. I was seeking, seeking, seeking to find everyone else's path because I figured you have to follow someone else in order to find your path until I found the path of be here now. And I thought I was going to go down this path. I'm going to be an expert in Ram Dass. And what Ram Dass taught me is how to be an expert in myself, that this whole journey was never about looking towards other people. Now, we do look towards others. We look to our parents for sure when we were little. We look to teachers because we're in school. We look to our bosses. We look to people that did whatever journey we wanted to do before us to follow their journey. But ultimately, what you start to learn is you pick what you like, you pick up what resonates with you, and you leave the rest. And that's how you feel blessed. That's how you let go of stress and you don't second guess and you don't live in a place of a mess. You just start to understand that it's not about your plan. You could have all the plans you want. You could be that kind of savant, but at the end of the day, it's really just to play in your own way because your path is specifically designed for you. So you have to find that path which is true for you, and that's your path through in this journey. But you have to find your clues. Like you can read books on other people's signs and journeys and synchronicities. Like people will say, oh, 10, 10 on the timer, this, that, and I do it too. But at the same time, it doesn't matter for me necessarily when we're talking about you, right? When I'm talking about me, for sure. But when we're talking about each one of us, each one has their own signs, their own things that are happening. I left the Jewish world. Can you imagine, right? You leave your entire way. So your friends from the past, you become that famous person who left that way. You didn't try to do it in that kind of way. You didn't want to play in that way, but you just learned to pray in your own way because that's the whole deal. You got to learn to do all these things in a way that works for you. So we look to all the coaches, all the therapists, all the entertainers, all the creators, all these things. Get a little tool here, a little tool here, and that's the idea. Pick the ones that work for you, resonate with you, and leave the rest. There are pathways that everyone takes. Everyone's born into a specific family, and people think it's like random. There is no such thing as random. You are specifically born into your home, into that family, so you can work through yourself vis-a-vis that family to figure out who you were to begin this journey, who you were behind this costume? Like, look behind. Can you see what's behind? Can you notice that you are not your brain? People think I think, therefore I am. I am is because I am. You are because you are. You exist because you exist. I can't do it for you. You have to know you're the light. You are a star. Do you know that? You're light. You're literally light. Your consciousness and awareness. This is just a suit. It's only acute. It's a brief period of time. And then you're onto a different design. That's the whole thing. And then you shine because you realize your light is supposed to shine because you're just light. This whole journey is passing show. I've never not been here. Do you ever remember not being here? Where were you before this? Do you remember being in your mother's stomach? Do you remember from 0 to about 7 years old? Maybe you remember one thing, two things from a picture because you think you remember. Most people don't remember anything in their younger years, and you definitely don't remember anything in your mother's stomach. Yes, we have people who jump out and like, yes, I remember. Okay, great. Okay, for the rest of us billion people out there that don't remember being in your mother's stomach, but you were alive in your mother's stomach, why don't you remember? Because we were little, that's why you don't remember. But I remember things from like a year ago. I shouldn't remember that either. But technically, how come we don't remember? How come we don't remember? Because we weren't here? You were here in your mother's stomach. You would remember being in your mother's stomach. Or would you? So you think you'd remember before you were in your mother's stomach? If you don't remember being in your mother's stomach and you only remember at a certain point now, that means that this whole time you wouldn't have remembered previous incarnations. And the whole thing is that it's a loop. You go on a loop, de loop, de loop, de loop, de loop, de loop, de loop, until one day you realize, holy cow, I've been here forever. And you're going to be here forever. Oh gosh. And then you get scared because you start to remember, and you breathe and you surrender.